capital market regulators from around the world converged on the city of Luxembourg recently for the 38th annual conference of the International Organization of Securities Commission, iosco, the platform saddled with the responsibility of regulating the global securities market. The 2013 iosco conference with the theme Connecting Global Finance was graced by securities market experts, relevant stakeholders, heads of securities commissions of different countries, representatives of various market jurisdictions, including Nigeria, whose delegation was led by Ms. Arunma Ote, Director General, Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC Nigeria, as well as financial market scholars who came with the sole aim of assessing the status of the world's capital markets, identifying challenges, and proffering solutions to the challenges. The conference was declared open by Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, who maintained that the theme of the 2013 iosco conference, Connecting Global Finance, was in harmony with the value proposition of the Luxembourg Financial Center, which was promoting the city-state of Luxembourg as a crucial connector in global finance.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure indeed to welcome you to Luxembourg. In fact, we are delighted, we are honored that the Luxembourg Supervisory Authority of the Financial Sector, the CSSF, has been chosen to host your annual conference, the main event in this organization's calendar. We consider this also as the recognition of the contribution that Luxembourg has made over the last decades in the field of international cooperation and integration, not only in the field of finance, by the way. The slogan of this year's annual conference is Connecting Global Finance. This slogan fits well with the value proposition of the Luxembourg Financial Center, which is quite essentially European and global in its reach. Luxembourg is home to people from over 160 different nations. But Toren has told us just a few minutes ago that's 170. Yesterday night, when this was written, it was 160. The Luxembourg economy is one of the most open in the world. In trade, and in particular in finance, the local market represents only a small fraction of goods and services produced locally. The most of the world's premier actors in international finance, the value proposition of the Luxembourg Financial Center has not gone unnoticed, thereby promoting Luxembourg to become an important connector in global finance. However, as the recent history of finance has demonstrated, the increasing interconnectedness of the world economy creates new opportunities, but it also creates new challenges. This, in turn, confronts supervisory authorities with new challenges as they must keep pace with internationalization and become themselves more interconnected. In this process, iosco plays a very important role, and there is hardly a more appropriate place than Luxembourg for you to discuss on how to further enhance that role.
Enumerating iosco's roles in responding to challenges confronting the world securities markets, Greg Metcalfe, iosco's board chairman, proffered that the organization should constitute the standard-bearer in confronting risks and threats. It must lead in setting standards for anticipating and responding to stress in markets across jurisdictions. He emphasized that iosco should be seen as a key reference point for global securities regulation by stakeholders, contending that it must be perceived as proactive, forward-looking and effective.
I became chairman at a critical time in the financial services industry, I believe, for securities regulators and for iosco. I think we actually have a number of common challenges. But again, often challenges are also opportunities, and I see them more as opportunities than as challenges. First of all, I think market-based financing clearly is growing, is seen as a critical role to play in funding economic growth in the coming years. Secondly, the globalisation is a fact of life. It's a challenge, and I think it's an opportunity. Thirdly, the increasing importance of growth in emerging economies is absolutely important in terms of the role they will play in facilitating future economic growth. And then finally is financial innovation. Always a good thing. But what we need to be careful of is when it drives complexity and perhaps adverse outcomes. So as I said, I think that these are four key challenges, but I think, again, I think there are opportunities. I think they're ones which I believe that we are grasping and we will continue to grasp over the coming years. So let me just give you some idea of what I see as iosco's role in dealing with these challenges and opportunities. As I said, my view is that as an organisation, we want to be seen, I believe we are seen by many of our stakeholders, as the key global reference point for securities regulation by our stakeholders, whether they be policymakers, industry, or our fellow members. I want us to be seen to be as an organisation, one that is proactive, forward-looking, and most importantly, that we're seen as being effective and what we do in terms of securities regulation. When we think about it, really we have three common collective goals. One is to make sure that investors in financial markets are confident and informed, that markets are fair, orderly and transparent, and finally, that we attempt or we try to reduce systemic risk. It's something we hold individually and collectively, and it is very much the objective of securities regulation and in turn collectively what we're focused on achieving at iosco as a global reference point.
For David Wright, Secretary General of iosco, the organization is advancing, though it has many challenges. He described iosco as inclusive and advised that it should strive to be even more so in future. He singled out two specific individuals who have made significant contributions to iosco's recent successes. They are Ranjit Ajit Singh, the new chair of the Growth and Emerging Markets Committee of iosco, whom he said was investing tremendous energy in developing the growth and emerging market access of iosco, and Ms. Arunma Ote, Director General, Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC Nigeria, and Chairperson of iosco's Africa Middle East Regional Committee, AMEC. He remarked that not only was Ote doing a swell job of restoring integrity to the Nigerian capital markets, she had also been instrumental to uniting Africa and Middle East markets and strengthening the voice within the iosco platform.
And let me also mention here Arunma Ote, the chair of the SEC Nigeria, chair of our AMEC committee. And I've been participating in a number of her meetings, and I can see the enormous effort she makes to draw together her members and seek to converge their views. It's admirable, and we need more of that in iosco.
Wright also provided insight into areas of concentration for the organization in the years ahead. These are pushing securitization forward, working on cybercrime, stemming issues relating to cross-border arbitrage, and inventing new approaches to enhance investor protection and education. The panel discussion on Thursday, September 19, was particularly illuminating. The panel, moderated by Mark Salusi, President, Association of the Luxembourg Fund Industry, featured Arunma Ote of Nigeria, Leonardo Gomez Pereira, Chairman, Securities and Exchange Commission of Brazil, Jamie Gonzalez Aguade, President, National Banking and Securities Commission, Mexico, Ranjit Ajit Singh, Chairman, Securities Commission, Malaysia, and Jae Hoon Yu, Commissioner, Finance Services Commission, Korea. It discussed extensively the success factors for growing capital markets, leveraging the experiences and insights of the panelists. The panelists also dwelt on the reform options they are currently exploring to boost market performance in their respective jurisdictions. In her presentation, the DG of the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC Nigeria, emphasized that capital markets are key in growing economies because they engender market discipline by instituting a culture of transparency and accountability, as well as strong corporate governance regime.
First, I want to say that I'm really delighted, and I thank iosco for giving me this opportunity to join this distinguished panel to share some views. And I just want to reiterate what's been said over the last few days about the Luxembourg being an absolutely outstanding destination. I said to Jean-Marc that the only thing that he didn't do very well with was the weather, and I think today he's done a good job on that. I think I'll do it a bit differently. Let me assume that all of you are Nigerian citizens, and I'm trying to make a case for the capital markets. I know I'm speaking to the converted, so just pretend you're Nigerian citizens, and then tell me how I've done afterwards. Well, first and foremost, you know that our Ministry of Planning released a master plan on infrastructure and said that over the next 30 years that we need $3.9 trillion of funding for infrastructure. And you know when you want to travel from Lagos on the Lagos-Ibadan road, you know it needs fixing. You know Niger Bridge needs fixing. You know the rail network needs replacement. The African Development Bank also said to us that every year we need $35 billion of funding over the next 10 years in infrastructure. You know our total budget for everything of the federal government is about $30 billion. So if we didn't pay salaries, if we didn't fund health, didn't fund education, we would still not have enough for infrastructure. The answer for me is really supporting us in the development of our capital markets so that we can find ways, whether through securitization, securitizing toll roads, whether through enabling foreign investors to invest in our markets, so we can better support the huge infrastructure needs of our country, which also provides, in my opinion, huge opportunities for us to unlock the potential of Nigeria. So that's government. I know Nigerians are enterprising. I mean, many of you own your own businesses. Many of you want to start your own businesses. And time again, my chairman, myself, and others are told that your key constraint is finance. What the capital market does, and some of the reforms we've done over the last 3 years, allow you, whether you're a small company, whether you're a large company, to raise money from the capital markets. But I want to see amongst you young people that I see in the audience is the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Aliko Dangotes of the world. Aliko Dangote is the richest man in Africa. And what the capital market does is allow people to help you realize this dream. I know that some of what is a challenge for a number of you is that some of you don't have cars, but you see your neighbor has 2 or 3 cars. What the capital market does is allow you to invest in some companies that are doing very, very well. And maybe you'll be able to purchase a car and not feel so bad. Because I know that that's an issue for the social and political future of our country. We all want to create wealth, but we also want to feel that we're as wealthy as our neighbor. I also know that corporate governance, transparency, and accountability is an issue that's been talked about so often in our country. You want to see companies that abide by the highest standards, because often people don't realize how so committed we Nigerians are to ensuring that things are done properly. But you also want to see whether whichever state you come from the 36 states in Nigeria, you want to hold your state governors accountable. When they come and issue bonds in the capital markets, what happens? They have third parties scrutinizing them, whether they be auditing firms to ensure that they have the right financial management framework, whether it be rating agencies. So you have the opportunity, you have more information to hold your leaders accountable. This, for me, is even more important as we entrench our democracy than just raising money. Did I do a good job in convincing you about the capital markets? Not quite. Yeah. But I do think that over the years, Mark, when you look at research or empirical evidence, I think there's no doubt that capital markets are key to growing economies. When you look at data produced by the World Economic Forum, the Global Competitiveness Index, a lot of what you've seen is that the countries who have done better have had capital markets support their growth over time. Because of what I said, you need funding if you want to grow. And you need funding from within the country, but you also need funding that comes from outside of the country. And what helps that is that people feel that there's an environment, there are instruments that can enable them invest their funds. So whether it be to support greater macroeconomic stability, whether it is to create greater employment opportunities, and all of us know that if we to productive enterprise, I can very much relate to what our colleague from Mexico said, because our own pension reform in Nigeria is a little under 10 years old. And in 10 years, we've been able to contribute about $22 billion, a lot of which today is deployed to the Nigerian capital markets. But for me, the two most significant, because we're all sold on raising medium to long-term financing, is transparency and accountability. That is what capital markets provide. But also income distribution issues. I was myself following some of the issues in Brazil and some of the protests, and I said to myself, look at what President Lula and Mrs. Delma have done in terms of raising the bar, income distribution and wealth distribution. And finally, of course, the diversification of risk is something that capital markets helps us do. In your introduction, Mark, you talked about what I would consider the overdependence, particularly in emerging markets, on banking finance. And I think that as our markets develop, there are clearly many different types of alternatives in terms of funding, and therefore in terms of risk management and risk diversification. So those would be my initial thoughts around what is the story that each of us must tell as we encourage everybody to understand the value of capital markets in our countries, not just for GEMS, but also even for developed markets.
Emphasizing that Nigerians are by their very nature very enterprising people who need empowerment to overcome the hindrance of financial constraint, Ote stressed that the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) Nigeria has implemented reforms in the last 3 years which have eased the process of capital raising in the market for small and big firms alike, as well as sovereigns.
You do need an ecosystem. In fact, in Nigeria, as an economic management team, what we have done is basically say that we must start with the venture capital private equity industry, because if you don't nurture companies properly from the very beginning, when they list, they may not be able to sustain the requirements or the response to the requirements that young people enjoy. So for example, our Ministry of Communications Technology basically puts seed money in an innovation fund, and that fund is being managed by a well-known VC PE firm. And the idea is to support young people in their business ideas, but also that all of us, a number of business planning competition initiatives around the country that are supported, either targeted at women, targeted at young people. And the idea is, because Nigerians are very enterprising people, is that from the very beginning, there's support services so that they understand what it means to run a company. And we are very interested in participating in those initiatives, because what we want to see is that when those companies then come to list on our alternative securities market, that they're very, very well prepared. Our exchange, of course, has revamped the requirements for listing, because before they were not really responsive to small and medium-scale enterprise. So the alternative securities market, which existed before, today has what you have, which is quite similar to what South Africa has, which is that you have nominated advisors that work with you from the beginning and stay with you through the listing process. So my own point is that how those companies begin and are managed before they come to the official public markets is very, very important to their sustainability and to their survival.
In his presentation, Ranjit Singh, Chairman, Securities Commission of Malaysia, explained that a strong regulatory foundation was needed to ensure future growth of capital markets.
In a sense, the question is an obvious one, and the answer is pretty obvious as well, that of course we need a strong regulatory foundation in terms of ensuring the future growth of the capital markets. As you showed in your slides as well, in many ways regulation is a very important component of those different aspects. My view is that it is really important for a few reasons. First of all, sustainability of markets. It's critical to ensure that there is sustainability. Good regulation really makes things predictable. The predictability, provides a key element in terms of fostering trust and confidence. And it is the deepening of trust that essentially gives the capital markets resilience and, most importantly, the potential for sustainable long-term growth. Now, what exactly constitutes the right regulatory foundation, in my view, is really one that provides confidence through regulatory certainty and fostering trust through good governance. It must also, as you touch on the issue, also allow for financial innovation that produces good, positive outcomes whilst avoiding the negative outcomes that, that we've seen happen. In many ways also, I believe that it is important that as regulators, we start talking less about the cost of regulation and more about the value of regulation. And in many ways, clearly you can see that, markets, I believe, should begin to use a sound regulatory framework as a major source of competitive advantage in many ways. My view is issuers and investors will ultimately go to where there is quality regulation, and we must not, as regulators, deviate from that particular path. However, of course, it's challenging because in many ways regulation and the foundations are, as I said, are obvious, but the regulatory framework and the key aspects of how we regulate markets, in my view, certainly does change as the state of the market and the environment that we are in changes as well. And you asked me for the experience of Malaysia. Yesterday I spoke more broadly, my thoughts around the subject. But let me now bring it closer to home, so to speak, and tell you in the Malaysian context how we've approached this. For us, the regulatory foundation really is something that we've worked on, if I look at it in a few stages of development. It is a continuous process, sequenced, very much taking into cognizance where the market is at, unfortunately also driven by some experiences that we had during the crisis, Asian financial crisis. And in a way, the kind of measures that we took post-Asian financial crisis were validated during the resilience that the market showed during the global financial crisis and events more recently.
Through their various presentations, the panelists established that through faithful implementation of a reform agenda, focusing on proper oversight and regulation, right market infrastructure, stimulating investor and issuer participation, capital market performance across jurisdictions, in mediating the flow of capital, strengthening macroeconomic efficiency, and providing stimulus for saving and investment culture will be greatly boosted. The panelists also recognized the complexities and difficulties involved in carrying these reforms through in different countries. To ensure that the reforms succeed, reform proponents need to develop well-articulated positions on reform implications for their countries, the people, and economies. As the curtains drew on the 2013 iosco conference, one thing that ran through all the agreements reached by the participants was the desirability of a strong enforcement mechanism to check market abuse, which is what the organization has focused on for many years. It is the business of market regulators, the conference concluded, to ensure that markets are fair, efficient, and transparent. Otherwise, the trust of investors will erode.